Well, hello, everyone. This is Mark Tinsley, and I want to welcome you to Clean Slate, where we talk about the real issues of the church with real people through real talk. I'm so glad you joined us today on our second special episode in as many weeks. Now, last week, we talked to Miss Elizabeth Brooks, who was the organizer of the student protest at Liberty University on September 13th, 2019. Miss Brooks' group, Students for Change, has been calling on Liberty University President, Mr. Jerry Falwell Jr., to submit to an internal investigation of his administrative practices in order to determine if there are indeed financial, personnel, and other misdealings happening at Liberty University. Now, media reports have been swirling over the past several months, accusing Mr. Falwell of everything from sexual scandal to nepotism to financial indiscretion to political intrigue. But one of the most concerning accusations from the media is that Mr. Falwell rules with a heavy hand. That's to say, named and unnamed sources have reported to media sources such as the New York Times, Reuters, Politico, the Washington Post, and others that Mr. Falwell hosts a culture of fear at Liberty University, wherein faculty and staff are not encouraged or allowed to exercise academic freedom. That they're fearful of speaking up for the truth for fear of being fired, ostracized, sued, or otherwise ruined in reputation. However, Mrs. Brooks added an interesting twist to our discussion last week. She indicated that the culture of fear doesn't end with the faculty and staff, but in fact, that culture may extend into the student body. And today we want to dig a little deeper into that accusation. Now, our guest for today is a senior at Liberty University, a native of Virginia, and a political science major. He's campaigned in at least a dozen Republican primaries and elections and considers himself an activist for change. Along with Ms. Brooks and others, he's calling for greater accountability and transparency from Mr. Falwell, and he's here today to offer his perspective on this alleged culture of fear at Liberty University, and his name is Mr. Ian Parish. Ian, it's good to have you here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Mark. It's pretty awesome to be here.
All right, man. And we just like to start off by getting to know our guests a little bit. Where are you from specifically? What are your dreams, your desires? What makes you tick?
So I'm from Luray, Virginia, which is about 2 hours, 45 minutes outside of Lynchburg, Virginia. So it's close to home, but it's not too close to home to go to college. But I originally started going to Liberty to pursue a law degree because that was what my parents were like. They wanted me to go to law school. They saw me and they're like, "Oh, you like to argue, go to law school." And I kind of fell in love with political science. I'd always kind of been a little bit of a political junkie. I grew up like watching Glenn Beck, for example, all the time. So I really loved working on campaigns. I really loved door knocking, which is not conventional for most people. Most people hate door knocking, but
that would be me.
I sincerely love being on the ground. I love connecting with people and getting their vote. Getting their vote and winning at the end of the day is the most fun.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So, talk to us about you're campaigning. You're doing these things with elections and primaries. What are your political views?
So, an excellent kind of story to segue into that is when I was working, I was 17 years old. It was right before I graduated high school. I was working at Walmart, which Walmart is not the best place to work at. But just putting my nose to the grindstone, I made, I think, $2,000, something like that.
Right.
And I decided on a whim, because this was during the 2016 Republican primary, decided on a whim to take a week off of work, take that money that I'd saved up, and get on a plane, go to New Hampshire, and campaign for the U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. Oh, wow. So that's a pretty good indicator of where my political views are at.
Right.
I'd say I'm very pro-life. I am for restrictions on immigration, for example. Right. Like I generally agree with the Republican consensus on that. I do have my disagreements on immigration policy, but that's more technical. I believe in like cutting taxes, religious liberty, things like that. Like,
so you'd consider yourself a political conservative.
Yeah, political conservative.
Right of center.
Absolutely. Right of center.
And your faith background, I'm assuming, is evangelical Christian.
So I grew up actually in the Methodist church. That's where my dad had grown up. Right. And this is a really funny story. So I grew up in the Methodist church. I was around 13 or 14, and I started going to my dad and being like, hey, United Methodists kind of fund Planned Parenthood on the side. Like, you might want to look into that. And he's like, no, it's fine. No, I don't believe that. And then he saw a headline where the United Methodist Church had basically come out sort of against the Second Amendment, come out against firearms, and he got all up in arms. He's like, Ian, why didn't you tell me? And I was like, no, Dad, I've been here. I've been trying to tell you. So they started looking for a new church. We went to a Lutheran church for a little while, and then we started going to this Southern Baptist church right outside of town, and it's Rileyville Baptist Church, and we've been going there for about 6-7 years.
Nice.
Something like that.
Nice. So let's kind of jump into our more formal, as it were, questions for the day. And the first one is, we're talking about Jerry Falwell Jr. And I think a logical question to ask anyone who has criticisms of Jerry is, do you know Jerry personally? Have you ever met him? Have you ever been in the same room with him?
I've never met Jerry personally, but like the man that Jerry is, I feel like I know him, or I feel like this is the guy you'd go out and like grab a coffee with. Right. So like, while I don't know Jerry personally, I don't feel like I wouldn't like him if I knew him per se.
Yeah, it seems like a good guy. Like you said, you could go out and have a cup of coffee with.
Well, I mean,
sit down and talk to.
To understand Jerry in my mind a little bit, you kind of have to look at Jerry Sr. And Jerry Sr. was a pastor, sure.
Absolutely.
But, as many men who knew Jerry Sr. would tell the story, he was the son of moonshiners, right? So like he's got a little bit of that good old boy blood in him. Sure. And I see the same exact thing in Jerry Falwell Jr.
Yeah.
And me growing up in that sort of Southern hillbilly kind of background.
Right.
Like I can.
That resonates with you.
Yeah, it resonates. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's good. So, what is your opinion of Jerry Falwell Jr.'s leadership of the university? Now, let's not necessarily get into any culture of fear things yet. I just want, generally speaking, what do you think of him as a leader?
Before we get into like the Politico, the Reuters article, stuff like that.
Yeah, good.
Jerry, I feel like we forget to give him credit for this sometimes, but like he did take a university that was on the brink of bankruptcy and make it the largest Christian university in the world. Not just the largest Christian university in the world, but we have an up and coming FBS team, which we're becoming a football school.
Right.
We're going to get there. Yeah. Like I firmly believe in Ian McCall's leadership. I firmly believe in Hugh Freeze's leadership. I believe that Jerry is picking good leaders. Now, that doesn't mean that these leaders aren't fallen. Doesn't mean these leaders don't have things in their background and their past. But he's picking, I think, repentant people who are good at leading and who are effective at their jobs. Okay. And with those three things, I think Jerry's like leading the school from an administrative sense in a very good way. Okay. Like I think he's administrating that well.
So in your opinion, then, he's a good administrator, he's a good business person, he's done a lot of good financially and administratively for the university.
From what we can see from the administrative side.
So then the Politico article, the Reuters article, the Washington Post, the New York Times articles, they all come flooding in the last 6 months. How do you respond to that? And and to add to that question a little bit, how does that affect the image of Liberty University?
How does that affect? Okay. Ooh.
Well, and so there's two questions here. What do you think about the news articles that come out, and what about its effect on Liberty?
I had a just like a little private chat with Pastor David Nasser, VP of Office of Spiritual Development at the university, and we had talked about how I use Twitter sometimes, and anyone who knows me, anybody who like ends up watching this, they know that like I'm a little bit like Jerry when it comes to Twitter. Like I get the sort of rough and tumble, wanting to get into a fight type thing.
Sure.
I get that. what gives me pause about the articles is I didn't care personally about the Politico article too much, but the Reuters article is the one that hit me.
Okay.
The one where he's like calling Chief Hinckley a half-wit and easily manipulated. He's calling students physically retarded and emotionally imbalanced.
Right.
And saying that, I think the worst part of it was saying not fit to lead.
Right.
Like, as the university president of Liberty University, where the mission statement is to train champions for Christ,
Right.
I would feel that maybe we wouldn't send an email saying, he's never going to be a leader.
Right.
And then I think it was 2012, 2013, according to the Reuters article, he sent another email because kids were parking down at Cinemark, and he was saying, we're going to break these dogs.
Right.
It's like, okay, you claim to love the students, and then you're going and saying this behind our back. You're saying this about your faculty and staff. Yeah. And then when you fast forward and you get to, I think it was this summer, I'm pretty sure, where he's on Twitter telling David Platt, hey, you need to grow, pair.
Yeah.
Because David Platt's apology, where it wasn't an apology in the sense of David Platt saying, I'm sorry for inviting President Donald Trump to church to pray over him, but it was more of in a Christian apologetic sense of an apology, where it's, I'm giving you a list of reasons of why I did what I did, and I'm not ashamed of doing it.
Right.
And that's what David Platt did. So if I feel if Jerry had read what David Platt's statement was, Jerry wouldn't have said that.
Right.
Right. And that kind of gets into the crux of what I'm a little worried about with Jerry here, is I feel like he's going off a little half-cocked at a lot of people.
Well, and it was a statement that I've heard a couple people reference where he said he was, when all these articles started coming out, and after the Politico article came out, and all these unnamed sources, former board members and whatnot, that we don't know exactly who they are, but Jerry says he knows who they are. And he says, I'm going to take care of this, and I got the meanest lawyer in New York City.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have a problem with that statement. Do you have a problem with a statement like that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So I don't have a problem with it insofar as I think, and especially our society, has sort of labeled Christian culture as gentle Jesus, meek and mild.
Right.
Right? Where we should always roll over when we're attacked. We should always just defend ourselves and just get pummeled. Now, that's not the Jesus I know. The Jesus I know threw money changers out of the temple. So if that's the mentality that Jerry Falwell Jr. is coming at it from, I can understand Jerry. But then at the same time, the meanest lawyers over what? These accusations. Like, when you say, I have the meanest lawyer, basically what he's saying is, most of this is true.
Right.
In the end. Like, that's kind of what he's confirming. And something I've heard from a lot of students.
Yes.
Is they didn't care as much about the possible nude pictures of Becky Falwell going around.
Right.
They didn't care so much about the pictures of the nightclub. I saw the pictures of the nightclub. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. But a lot of people were more concerned with using tuition dollars to funnel that into enriching friends and family when tuition's like $36,000 a year.
Is that what it is now? Wow. So that segues nicely, and maybe you've already answered the question, but I'll ask you. What is the greatest charge in your mind that's been levied against Jerry?
It's definitely a Reuters article. You claim to love students and train and want to train them as champions of Christ, and then you have him behind closed doors saying these things about students and faculty and staff.
Right.
But also, Jerry, I believe he said on Twitter one time that I'm the business side of things. If you want the spiritual side, go to Nasser and the students. While I agree, Pastor David is a fantastic representation of Christ on campus. Like, I've met with the man, I've talked to him. He cares individually about every single student.
Right.
That doesn't mean he can meet every student. Doesn't mean he can talk to every student. Doesn't mean he can meet every concern. It doesn't mean he can even address this.
Right.
But he is a good representation of Christ, and when people attack him, they're wrong for that. But to be a leader of a Christian university, to say in 2016 things like, I'm the evangelical leader here, and I'm throwing my support behind Trump. And then when he comes under fire to distance himself from Christ, that rubs me the wrong way, that rubs students the wrong way. So I think that's the biggest charge. And what that does to the image of liberty is it does make us look like, it makes Christians look wildly hypocritical.
Right.
And that's not to say that we don't look hypocritical, because like today, for example,
Right.
we just hired Emily Austin. Emily Austin is a woman who, I think this happened in Florida, was a Fox Sports broadcaster, was caught on a Barstool Sports podcast saying some wildly racist and offensive stuff.
Oh, no.
And
Wow.
it's not good, but Liberty picked her up.
Right.
Why did Liberty pick her up? Because we do believe in redemption, grace, and forgiveness. Right? And that's why we picked up Ian McCall. That's why we picked up Coach Hugh Freeze.
Right.
That's why we're picking up good, and this kind of goes back to Jerry's administrative side a little bit. He's picking up flawed people, but good people, in my mind.
Okay. So, and there are obviously differences of opinion on that. There are a lot of people that consider the hiring of McCall and Freeze and Austin.
I mean, that type of stuff gives me pause too, because I sit here and I look at it from an optics perspective.
Sure.
And I look at it and go, Ian McCall just got ousted from Baylor for possible rape allegations and the cover-up surrounding that. That doesn't look good on us.
And I think a lot of people just ask the question, is this really the best that Liberty could find to fill these positions? With them under so much controversy. And I get it. You ask the same questions. But I know a lot of people. But there's a difference of opinion on that.
Right.
I mean, obviously, a difference of opinion. I appreciate your opinion on that. But let's get to the kind of the meat and potatoes then of why I asked you to come on. I'm exploring this idea of a culture of fear at Liberty University. But in particular, what Ms. Brooks said last week about there being a culture of fear among students. Do you see that?
$1 million question. Yes and no. I see it with some students. I don't see it with others. And so for example, when the Politico article first came out, I was defending Jerry to the hilt because I just had this meeting and I was like, you know what? I don't have the full context to this. We don't have the full context. I'm going to wait till it comes out. Then the Reuters article came out. I got involved with the protest. But me as Ian Parish, I have never felt this culture of fear on this university. I've always been one of the most critical, loudest, kind of negative voices in the room. And I've just never felt that, fear of retaliation. I was brought into the Office of Community Life one time because they were looking for whoever ran a meme account. And I was like, no, I don't run that.
Right.
But the point is, I've never felt it. But have other students? Definitely. Leading up to the protest, I had numerous kids who were in this group chat that we had. They went from, we're gung-ho, we want to do this, to, I heard from somebody that Loop D would arrest me, I'm out. I heard that RAs can give out points for this, I'm out. And sort of a little bit of fear from that, because there are some students who, I would argue, aren't experienced enough in this type of thing to know that they don't have to be afraid.
Right. But so how extensive is this fear among the students? I mean, if you could give a percentage. A
percentage, gosh. I'm gonna disagree with Elizabeth here. I love her to death. I'm gonna say if it was a percentage, it'd have to be 20-25%.
Okay. It's about a quarter of the student body in your opinion, right?
Yeah, it's a minority of students. It's typically the students that do feel afraid trend to more moderate, more liberal. And I would say now, I used to be a dyed-in-the-wool, hard conservative, right of center Republican. And I would say, if you asked me today, on the street, moderate. So a lot of these students are left-leaning. They're moderate.
Moderate, right.
They're just a tiny bit right of center like me.
Okay.
Or...
So maybe they feel that they're in a land that's not their own, is what you're saying. A
little bit is the feeling of they're in a land that's not their own, but also a little bit. For example, I don't remember which specific person this was, but I had a friend who worked in registrar's office, and she was like, "Yeah, no, we started sharing the Politico and Reuters article on our personal devices because we were afraid that Jerry was watching."
Okay.
When that type of thing happens, when that type of thing gets said, when the Politico article comes out, for example, you have this tendency of, someone said there's a culture of fear, now we're afraid.
Right.
And that culture of fear has always kind of been there, But the more you kind of poke and prod at the beast a little bit, the more exacerbated it becomes.
I agree with that. You can talk people into their viewpoints on things.
Oh yeah.
How they see the world. Yeah. Of that 20 or 25% of the student body that maybe does live in some level of fear. I mean, I'm sure students aren't sitting around shaking in their rooms.
Yeah, no, it's not.
It's not that kind of fear. But of the ones that do live in a bit of cultural fear at the school, what are they afraid of?
They're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid.
In what form? Like, what kind of retaliation do you think?
Anything from points to being called into the Office of Community Life to possible expulsion. Like, some kids are afraid of that. I kind of sit there and go, guys, I'm letting you know.
Right.
I've done a lot at the university. I've gotten into a lot. Like, Jerry has me blocked on Twitter, for example.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
They've never once been like, we got to expel you now. Like, so some of the fear, I feel, is a little irrational amongst the students.
Right.
But it is well-founded. And the reason I think it is well-founded and that there's an argument for it is because I do think there is a legitimate culture of fear surrounding staff and faculty.
Oh, okay.
Why does that culture of fear exist? Because A, we have board members coming out anonymously saying the stuff in the Politico article. B, Jerry retaliating and not saying, hey, let's sit down and talk about some of the stuff I've done.
Well, this is how the meanest lawyer out of New York City thing came about.
And he goes, I've got the meanest lawyer in New York City.
Right.
Is that exactly dispelling the idea that there's a culture of fear among faculty and staff? No. I've had professors who would use innuendo and implication to try to say, hey, the president of the university is wrong about this.
Right.
And mostly, they were theology professors.
Yeah.
And the theology department got downsized by half. And the school will tell you, well, no, we don't have enough students in the theology department. A history professor, and I think he took this down because I can't find it, but a history professor posted on a job search site, posted a picture of a job search site that said, Liberty University looking for new professors of the religious department. So it's like, I understand why there's a culture of fear among staff and faculty, and that fear is an infection. It's a virus, and it trickles down, and it goes from staff who aren't tenured, who can't speak their minds about things, and it trickles down into the students. And the students get, in my mind sometimes, irrationally afraid of some things.
So talk about that. Why irrationally?
Because, quite literally, there is nothing the school can do if we speak our minds.
Right.
Like, there can be social ostracism, which happened to me for a couple of years, a little bit. Like, not even, and see, that's the thing. When it comes to social ostracism, like being kind of pushed out of social circles, that didn't even happen to me because I just spoke my mind and people knew that's what Ian thinks.
Right.
So getting pushed out of social circles is a part of it. I think, why is it irrational? Gosh.
Yeah. Well, I think you've sort of answered that. There's really no physical fear. There's no
okay. No, perfect example. David French, he's a writer for the National Review. Great guy.
Right.
I've met him a couple times. Kind of a nerd, but awesome dude. All right, if you've seen him on Twitter and say that the Justice League movies are better than the Marvel movies, he's just wrong. David, I hope you hear this. But for example, he's a First Amendment lawyer, and he made his career off of going to bat for students who had retribution from their campuses based on limiting their speech. Adam Steinbaugh, he's a lawyer for, I think, Fire, I believe. He DM'd me, and I think he DM'd Elizabeth, and he's like, hey, just letting you know, if y'all have any First Amendment issues, we would love to get on board if the school's trying to tamper your
So there are
First
people
Amendment
out there to support you.
There are absolutely people out there to support us.
Right.
And I think the fear partially comes from they think they're alone. Right. And something that I've seen on this campus that I have not seen in 3 years, and I've been critical of Jerry since my freshman year.
Right.
Because I didn't like when he endorsed Trump. I was a dyed-in-the-wool Cruz supporter.
Sure.
I didn't like the way he phrased some things.
Right.
Convocation at Liberty for 2 years was just all political,
Right.
all pro-Trump.
Right.
Wasn't a fan of the bread and circuses, if you will. But the thing that's changed in the past 3 years is that these articles came out. Students didn't instantly cover for Jerry.
Right.
From freshmen to seniors. Now, seniors and juniors are usually the ones that are the most disenfranchised and go, yeah, there are problems with this university. But the freshmen and the sophomores, too.
Yeah, so you're seeing it among the entire student body.
I'm seeing it among the entire student body where they're going, hey, I'm uncomfortable with Jerry's business dealings, or hey, I'm uncomfortable with the way he speaks about students.
So Elizabeth shared a story, and she didn't use any names. And I would ask you not to either if you have anything, but she had told a story about someone who was sort of strong-armed by the Falwell family not to protest, and the person pulled out of the protest at the last minute. Other than that particular person whom you probably know, is there anyone else that didn't go to the protest, pulled out late or whatever because they said, hey, I'm fearful. I don't want to do this. I don't want to put my name out there?
Mostly, I think it was...
Because you had about 35 people there, right?
Cycling through. Not 35 people all together at one time, but like as people had to go to classes
Gotcha. You're right,
and stuff.
I understand.
So we had around... I would say like 30, 35.
Because that doesn't sound like a lot to folks who, when they think about a protest, they're thinking about hundreds, thousands of people.
For
you had
Liberty
35.
University, that's a ton.
Okay.
For Liberty. It's a lot. And
if there were not even 20% of the student body that feared, how many do you get a sense of maybe the more people would have come to the protests?
So my thing about that is the protests are from people like me who have absolutely nothing to lose. Like I don't stand to gain really much from doing this type of thing, but what I do is help in part represent students. So for example, I'm in student government at Liberty. I'm a delegate. I've been a delegate for 3 years.
Right.
That's the bottom of the totem pole.
Sure.
Bottom of the pecking order. But the thing about that is, whereas our student body president and vice president can represent us to the administration and talk to the administration, they can't actively show that sort of disdain.
Sure.
Because they have to have a working relationship with that administration. So I feel like my role at the university is to represent those students who do feel too afraid to come out and to do that type of protest and to show viscerally and to show physically that students are displeased. I think I had about 3 or 4 girls drop out. And it was mostly because they either thought they were going to get arrested by Loopty, which just is not a thing.
Which is the LU Police Department, just so people know.
The Liberty University Police Department. Right. They thought they were going to get arrested by them, or they thought that their RAs were going to give them points and like points against the record.
Gotcha.
So, like, we didn't have anything where like the Falwell family was each individually picking out people and like trying to boot them. Like that didn't happen.
Right.
But
just these kind of overarching.
Yeah, overarching narratives.
So I appreciate your honesty.
Yeah, no.
This is great, and I appreciate that you don't jump on a bandwagon of, hey, there's 75% of students who are fearful of the administration, and I assume that the percentage was small and that it's a minority. But let's say it's even 10% of students. We'll even drop it down. My gut tells me that if you asked students at University of Virginia or Virginia Tech or James Madison, Lynchburg, University of Lynchburg, I was going to say Lynchburg College, but University of Lynchburg, hey, are you fear of your administration? That number would be so low.
Yeah.
It would be essentially zero.
Right.
But even if it's 10% at Liberty, that seems unacceptable to me. How would you respond to that?
I would say where there is a spirit of fear, there isn't the spirit of the Lord, for example. I think one person living in fear is one too many. I don't think that means that Jerry or Pastor David has to come down from on high and
no, I understand.
Salve every fear. But what I do feel about that is, the administration does have a responsibility, instead of doing what the Liberty University Twitter account has been doing and going back and forth with people who criticize the university and blocking students. Like a good friend of mine, John DeWitt, I've known him since freshman year. John would criticize me and he'd be like, nah, you're too hard on Jerry. Freshman year. He's blocked by the Liberty University
Oh,
administration account.
Oh,
He's
wow.
he's a theology student. Good guy.
Right.
Like, salt of the earth, good man.
Right.
This guy defended Jerry to the hilt for 3 years.
So you're saying then the administration should not be writing off, even if it's a small percentage.
Absolutely
Right.
not. Like, they shouldn't be writing it off. And part of what the protest was about is, like, we do want accountability and transparency. Like, I've talked to David Nasser. I've talked to Scott Lamb. I've talked to, like, good people around Jerry. And it eludes me how Jerry doesn't just have a little bit of accountability to just hold off on a little bit of what he says. And I think something that would allay the fears of students is if Jerry Falwell got up in convocation and he was like, hey, look, I just have some crappy things about y'all. I've done some crappy things.
And I'm sorry.
And look, I'm, from the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry. I don't always articulate myself well. I'm not the best person at this, but I genuinely love each and every one of you. And why I try my hardest and why I fight the battle I'm fighting is to make this university the best university in the world. And if he got up and he said that, he would get a standing ovation.
So you opened this door a little bit ago. I didn't run through it at the time, but I'm ready to run through it now. Is the culture of fear with the faculty and staff. You said you've sensed that there is some of that. How extensive is that in your opinion? How much have you seen it? Do you have any anecdote stories of seeing this fear in faculty or staff?
Staff, when you ask them, I remember freshman year being a total jerk. Like, I was that kid in the class who'd be like, but professor. And Jerry had said something, I don't remember what it was, but I asked my professor about it in front of everyone in class. And he was like, I'm not going to answer that question. Moving on. So, like, little things like that. I remember one of the bravest professors I had was an apologetics professor who'd be like, hey, some of the stuff you're learning here, it's wrong. I'm here to tell you it's wrong. And he'd be like, yeah, no, your university president said this in convocation today. No. And he would, like, actively fight back about this. And in this apologetics class, we talked about sort of, for example, racial animus, like, sort of, to use a kind of hotter button term, the sort of race conflict that we have in the United States, the struggle relating between black and white folks, primarily. He would address that head on, and he'd be like, hey, here's where the church fails, here, and here. So that was probably the bravest professor I had. I'm not sure if he still works at the university. I haven't checked. But it depends on what department you're in. It depends on how you feel about things. Like, most professors, like, you're not going to get a math professor to try to talk about politics, right? But, like, in the Helms School of Government, most of the professors either, agree implicitly or explicitly. So there's not much of a culture of fear there. But among people in the registrar's office, from what I've heard, yeah, there's a little bit of fear amongst staff. Like, people who are afraid to come out and say anything. Part of that's because in the Reuters article, Becky sent an email saying, hey, should this girl be working for the university? Now, I don't agree with Becky's wording. I think she worded it probably not professionally. But if you go and you look at the girl's post, she was saying, yeah, I'm going to break my leg for a parking spot. I hate working here. If a worker at Harvard had posted that, I'm pretty sure they'd fire her. If a worker anywhere had posted something like that, I'm pretty sure they would fire her. So while I don't think Becky conducted herself in the most professional way, I do think, and I think there's a legitimate basis for this, that email right there does cause this culture of fear where if Becky or Jerry see something, you better watch out.
Well, there is one faculty member who's on the record as saying that at faculty meetings, annual faculty meetings at the beginning of the semester, that administrators would stand up in these faculty meetings and say, there are people lined up for your job out there, so do a good job, be the best professor you could be, because there's a lot of people that want to work here that are lined up for your job. And he described it as being at once a pat on the back and a threat.
It is a little bit of a threat.
And then there was one of the vice provosts who came out and did a video for the online faculty, and he said the exact same thing. I viewed this myself. He said, there are people lined up for your jobs, and with a smile on his face. Do you think that thing would engenders a culture of fear among faculty?
That does make faculty and staff a little fearful. Because, like, for example, when my dad is working, and my dad works at a company called Masonite, when my dad's working and he's training people, is there sort of a mentality that, oh, I might be training my replacement? Yeah. But that exists in every job. Right. That's not just my dad's job. That was when I would train people when I worked at Cookout last semester. So when I was training people, I was going, is that my replacement? So is there a bit of fear there? Yes, I think it's a healthy fear to some extent. But I also do think that when the administration keeps kind of repeating, hey, someone's going to take your job if you step out of line a little bit.
And when you see the comments in the media, and when you see actual folks being fired, let go, not renewed in their contracts because of things that they've said.
Yeah, no, absolutely. See, like, I think the fear from faculty and staff mostly comes from not being able to express a political opinion. And I find it fascinating that the man who in 2016, 2017 would always be on CNN or Fox News saying, I am not attached to the university. I'm my own private person. I can have my own opinion.
But here it is.
The other folks, everyone else that works for the university can't have a private opinion, and they feel like they can't have a private opinion because they're going to get kicked.
Well, that's a great point. I think that's a great point that I've not heard anyone make to this point.
Something I just thought of. So I don't know if you saw this, but Jerry Falwell went on a 5-minute interview, just like a brief appearance on Sebastian Gorka's radio show.
Yeah, I did watch that.
I am not a fan of Gorka. I think he's not a fan. But Jerry and Gorka said something. So Gorka said this, and then Jerry just kind of sort of implicitly agreed.
Right.
Where Gorka was like, you are making all the right enemies. The left is angry. And is Brandon Ambrosino, the author of the Politico article, is he politically liberal? I would assume so, yes. But in painting every single person that disagrees with you as liberal sort of betrays this sort of, and Jerry just implicitly agreeing with it, betrays this sort of siege mentality where, anyone who disagrees with me is of the left, they're against Christian values, and they're out to get me.
Well, and it's, Elizabeth Brooks last week is an evangelical conservative Christian. She's spoken out very vehemently against Jerry Falwell and the things that he's been accused of in these articles. Now, you're more moderate, but you're identifying some weaknesses and some things that you don't agree with, some things that you question. You're an evangelical, conservative Christian. So I do think that portrayal that anybody who disagrees is suddenly left of center is incorrect. I mean, it's patently incorrect. And that's what I'm hearing you say as well.
Well, no, I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Are some people who have disagreements liberal? Yes,
absolutely.
But that doesn't make them bad people.
Right.
And that's ultimately kind of where I think, if to circle back around to the students and the culture of fear amongst students, I kind of feel that students feel, because if they actually identify as liberal, they go, people think I'm bad.
Okay, so getting towards the end here, I just want you to, if you could summarize the things that you're critical of Jerry Falwell Jr. of, what are those things in a nutshell?
So I'd say the thing I have the most criticism of is the thing I see in myself a lot. It's going off half-cocked. It's firing your mouth off and asking questions later,
Sure.
Like, I have a big problem with that. I have to get myself under control. Right? I have a system of accountability. My old prayer leader will always, he'll text me. He'll be like, hey, delete that tweet. That's either not Christ-like or that's irresponsible.
So the impulsiveness.
Is
one thing. Okay.
So the impulsiveness, the sort of how he's become emboldened to just disrespect people who disagree with him.
All right.
Just like the blatant disrespect.
Okay.
And I would say the third and final one, this is more because I come from a poorer side of the country, but tuition being as high as it is if it is indeed going to funnel money towards friends and family through contracts.
Right.
Like, if that's happening, like, that's kind of crap. That's not something I'm really supportive of. But I can't speak toward the financials. I'm not a finance major.
Right, I understand.
Outside of my expertise, so I don't know about that.
Well, Elizabeth said the same thing last week, and I said, well, few of us are, right? So what would you like to see done? What would you like to see Jerry do to respond to all this?
So, like I kind of said earlier, if he were to stand up in convocation and go, hey, I've treated y'all really badly sometimes. I've said some bad things about you. Because don't get me wrong. I understand talking smack about someone behind their back, honoring someone in their presence and not honoring someone in their absence.
Right.
I've done that.
Right.
I've had to go to people, and this is the most sobering, humbling thing I've ever done. Go to people and say, hey, I know you're being nice to me. And this was actually right after something we talked about off the air, the PBS NewsHour interview I did. This one girl that had reached out to me, and I consider her a mentor. She's kind of like my DC mom. She had said, oh, hey, you're awesome for that interview. That was so good. I'm proud of you. And I'd never talked to her before, and I was kind of starstruck. And I was like, hey, I've talked some smack about you before. And while I want to accept the kind things you're saying to me, I've got to let you know.
Right.
But so circling back out of that anecdote, if Jerry just said, hey, I've talked smack, I haven't always been appropriate.
Right.
I haven't done everything correct, but I do genuinely love the student body. And I want to help the student body. And I want you to be the best leaders you could be. And my job is to help equip you. And sometimes I'm brash and I'm irreverent. And that's who I am. And I can't totally get rid of that. But I can temper myself with the counsel of those around me. And I humbly ask for your apology. And moving forward, we're going to try to work on this. I can't promise you the yellow brick road and, streets of gold. I can't promise you that. But what I can promise you is I'm going to make an active, conscious effort to try and be civil with people who disagree with me. So that's all I want personally. Now, we can have an investigation into sort of the financial allegations. We can have transparency when it comes to the explicit photos. I personally, out of respect for the family, because I understand when like stuff like that gets out, out of respect for the family, I would wish that, like, it would be my hope if I were in that situation, that I would talk to the media and be like, hey, can we not? Can we just not talk about that? Like, you can hit me on everything else. Come at me. But can we just leave my wife off the table? Because, like, I do feel, and I feel that sometimes, Jerry's feelings are legitimate in a sense, because they're not just coming after him. They're not just coming after the school. They're coming after his wife, too.
Right. Well, yeah, and unfortunately, we can't control the media. They do what they want to do. But I don't think that's their biggest concern, though. That's just like a little sidelight in these articles. Most of it's the financial and the personnel
That's
issues.
the newest stuff that's come out. Everything else was sort of a recap.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is very similar to what Elizabeth said last week. What I've heard a lot of people say is just repent. Just ask for forgiveness, and we can move on from that point of forgiveness. And
I believe it's in the book of Micah, I think, where it goes, seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Right. So seeking justice does not mean you are just.
Right.
Loving mercy does not mean you're 100% merciful.
Oh, absolutely.
Walking humbly does not mean you don't stumble down the road. Right. I am not, like, if I'm expecting perfection from Jerry, I'm damning myself to hell, because I'm never going to be perfect in that regard. Like, I try. Don't get me wrong. I have that accountability structure where they go, that's not Christ-like. You should probably not do that. And have I sinned? Have I hurt other people? Yes. Day by day, week by week, we sin, we fall, we hurt others. But I do think that a conscience, and he might be taking conscious effort right now. We don't know. I mean, you and I, we have no idea. But just a little verbal recognition of that to the student body, I think it would evaporate so many
and I agree with everything you just said. And that's why God gives us repentance.
Right.
That's what repentance is all about. It's about washing the slate clean of all the mistakes and the sins that we make, because, we're all there.
Yeah.
We're all at the point.
Just like Jerry
absolutely.
needs it, Hugh Freeze needed it, Ian McCall needed it, Emily Austin needed it. We have, I think, one of the beautiful things about not just the faculty and staff that you can see that are visible, but each and every student is we have made mistakes, but we do, in a spirit of humbleness, repentance, and grace, try to move forward.
So what's your hope for Liberty as we move into the future? Not Jerry. We're not talking about Jerry now.
Hope
for Liberty
Hope for
University.
Liberty.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I hope one of the cool things I just keep thinking about is we get to be a big FBS school. We get in the Big Ten. We just crack. we roll in there, and we give the world a run for its money in the Big Ten. I'd love so. I have two favorite college football teams besides Liberty. Liberty's always going to be my home team. But I love Ohio State, big Ohio State fan, and UVA. So those are my two big schools.
There you go.
If, in the weeks ahead, if we could beat UVA, that'd be really cool. It's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen.
You never know.
I have faith in Coach Freeze's experience and his coachability, so to speak. I'd love to see him beat UVA. I'd love to see him beat Ohio State eventually. Other sort of hopes for Liberty. There were fears about its accreditation status. I'd like to see that stay. I don't like.
Right.
I'd like to see us keep our accredited status. I don't know. Like, I'd like to see Liberty at the end of the day, like after the football and like the glitz and the glamour. I'd love to see the student body stay the way I've experienced it for the past 3 years. So I used to live on a place on campus called The Hill. And I think it was The Hill 22-3 and 17-2 when I lived there. And nothing could compare to the type of community I had in those places and the type of community you find at Liberty. And the reason why I do genuinely like parts of the Liberty way that other people disagree with, like not allowing drinking on campus and stuff like that, is it genuinely fosters a community of togetherness. And I've never I've been to a lot of campuses in my years. Like freshman year, I was on the debate team, traveled all over. Nothing compares to the community.
Well, I think if you go to
Liberty.
Convo one time or Wednesday evening church convocation is an amazing experience, and I can see why students would want to go there.
And I want that community to continue, and that's sort of my biggest fear with all of this stuff that comes out about Jerry is it does splinter the community. It does grieve the body of Christ. It genuinely does.
Well, Ian, thank you so much for being here today. It was wonderful having you on. I appreciate your balanced view, and I appreciate your honesty.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yep, absolutely. And thank you all for joining us on this special episode of Clean Slate, where we were really focusing in on the culture of fear. Last week, we heard that maybe the student body was split in somewhat of a 50-50. Some feared, about half feared, half didn't. Ian brings a different perspective. Maybe the percentage is not nearly that high. Maybe it's as low as 20% of the students, which is 1/5 of the student body. The question we have to ask ourselves, though, is how much is too much? How much fear on a campus are we willing to live with? On a Christian campus, a Christian institution of higher education, how much is too much? And as both Ian and Elizabeth told us, there is that sense that there is a culture of fear among faculty and staff, that maybe academic freedom is limited a little bit and free speech is limited a little bit, and how much of that is too much. Well, I'm not here on Clean Slate to tell you how much is too much, but I hope with these two perspectives, you're able to take the information they've provided, weigh it for yourself along with the articles and the various media sources and social media sources, and come to your own determination of where you stand in your opinion of how Jerry Falwell Jr. is leading the administration and the students of Liberty University. Well, I thank you so much for being with us. I hope you've enjoyed this special episode. We'll have some other special episodes between now and January of 2020, but starting in January of 2020, we'll be entering Season 3 of Clean Slate, where we talk about the real issues of the church with real people through real talk. We'll see you next time.